would like to call the meeting of the Transportation and Circulation Committee to order, please.
Okay, roll call. Committee member Franz?
Here.
Horn?
Here.
Hodges?
Here.
Malavos?
Here.
Sanford, excused. Blackerby?
Here.
And Chair Rodriguez is excused.
We do changes to the agenda.
Are there any changes to the agenda?
Mr. Chair, there are no changes to the agenda.
Thank you. Are there any announcements?
Yes, we have a number of announcements. First of all, we have a new committee member. This is his first meeting. So Andres Malavos is coming to us. And would you like to say anything about your process in getting here, or anything we should know?
Oh, just happy to be here. I thought it was a great opportunity, and I saw it, and so submitted, and here I am today. So, yeah, welcome to join.
Thank
Excellent.
you.
And
Welcome.
so we met with Andres and gave him kind of the play-by-play of you guys and said everything would be okay. So please behave. And then also I want to, this is kind of a milestone time right now because Ed France, who has been a committee member since 2008, this is his last meeting. And he is still trying to stay on. He's got an application in the council to stay on the downtown parking committee. But in this one he's going to resign. He can tell you a little bit about that. But also the other thing you might not know is Ed France has also resigned from the Bicycle Coalition. And I just want to say that I've been working with the Bicycle Coalition as a kind of a loose form of group of folks on a volunteer basis since my career started here at the city in 1991. And what Ed France has done for the Bicycle Coalition is nothing short than phenomenal. He's taken them to a new place of organization with a strong representation, not just in the city, but in the county. They have their location on Haley, so they have a place. They've got a building they own. They've got BC Centro, which is just an incredible place where kids and people can come to learn how to work on bikes and learn everything about bikes. And everything that Ed has done for the Bicycle Coalition has just turned to gold. So it's just has been a really exciting career, not just at the Bicycle Coalition, but also on this committee, forming much of the city policy that has led to the projects that are on the ground now. So I just like to give Ed just a moment to speak a little bit about whatever he wants to tell you. But it's quite a celebration for me to recognize the role he's done for this, both for the city and for the Bicycle Coalition, which are simultaneously coming to a sunset. He's got some exciting new things on the horizon that perhaps he'll tell you about. So, Ed France.
Thank you very much. Rob, thank you so much. That is a very... my career with the Bicycle Coalition, including our past president chairing the meeting tonight, and this community of residents, community members, transportation planners, and interested people. It's been such a great opportunity for me, and I want to share a thought about kind of my time, which I think I was saying was 8 years because I can't count the years, up to almost 11 years somehow that I've served on this committee. I will say that when I first started doing work with the Bike Coalition and then was encouraged to join the Transportation and Circulation Committee by Mark Bradley from Coast, I jumped into such a highly politicized environment. And it was kind of crazy going back to that time. Every transportation issue was sort of like this make or break political time. And I'm proud of the fact that advocates for sound transportation planning for all people who are using our streets and right-of-way really came to the fore. But what I'm most proud about, and I think this is such an acknowledgement to the City of Santa Barbara staff and to the TCC and the community that we've had, is that these issues have become increasingly just discussions and getting everybody up to speed. The level of politicization of basic things like, okay, there's a death at this intersection. How are we going to deal with it? It's a straightforward process. It's a detailed process. And it's something that we really have to work with everybody to come to a common understanding. But it's not this politicized, nasty, negative thing that we had an era that transportation kind of had to live in. And I'm just so thankful to be able to have had the time to see that change. And I hope that that's a positive sign for a lot of things when there's this negative, just vitriolic kind of energy, that it doesn't have to be that way. So it's been a real pleasure to serve. And thank you so much for the opportunity.
Yeah, do you want to tell us a little bit about what you're doing next?
I'm extremely pleased to take a position with Leading From Within, which is a leadership development organization that serves Santa Barbara County and also Ventura, and to a degree LA County. And this will be a real opportunity for me to grow in the social sector and try to support more of our nonprofit and government leadership in really kind of a whole, bringing your whole person approach to how you do work, because there's technical work, but you really have to lead from your true self, from your heart, and it's a total privilege to be able to dive into that in my next career chapter. So, thank you.
Excellent. Well, thank you for your service. I don't know if any committee members want to say anything. Okay.
Well, if it weren't for Ed, I wouldn't be sitting here today and watching in my role as a board member and thereafter as the president of the Bike Coalition Board. I watched such transformation, and including from now we have BC Centro in Santa Maria, and we have a county-wide presence, which we didn't have before. Even from the purchase of the property was a part of the purchase of the Bike Coalition offices and BC Centro. But beyond that, I've just been amazed by the growth through the whole Bike Master Plan process and the engagement of community members and others to participate in that process at a high level, a level that was not often seen before, and that it's a gradual transformation, but it's a steady transformation. And Ed, you've made that possible. So thank you so much for your work.
It's good, really good. And I just say, we deal with all forms of transportation, and in Santa Barbara, the dominant form is driving, and that's good. And we want people to have drive congestion-free in Santa Barbara. That's really our goal. That's one of the reasons people come from Los Angeles. They don't want congestion. And MTD and bicycling and walking are a very important element of enabling the majority of us who drive to do that congestion-free. So it's a really important role, and more people are doing bicycling, not just for transportation, but because they want to be healthy. And thanks for your leadership in that regard and on this committee. So much appreciated. Mr. Chair, one more announcement that I have. Melissa Cunningham, who is in the second row next to Barry, she is the new executive director of the Coalition for Sustainable Transportation, better known as COAST. So welcome to her, and thank you for being at this committee meeting. Those are all the announcements I have.
We return to public comment, and could Barry Remus, would you be?
Okay, I'm speaking on individual agenda items.
Okay.
General public. So I'd like to speak after the staff presentation.
Very good. Perfect. So let's move on to the consent calendar, the approval of the minutes from June 27th, 2019 TCC meeting, where our TCC quorum was present.
I move approval.
Is there a
Need
second?
I second it.
It has been moved and seconded. We have a motion. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay.
And it's okay for you to
Any
vote on
comment,
the minutes.
Andres? Very good.
Okay.
We move on to reports, the Cliff Drive Vision Zero and Active Transportation Corridor Planning Effort.
Mr. Chair, I'd like to introduce our traffic engineer, Derek Bailey, who will walk you through the process. We've been very excited about this one. This is the end game here is that we would end up with an active transportation planning grant, and he'll tell you about that back to council for that. So we've been developing this process with the Mesa for a long time, starting actually with, I think it was 2008 when, was it 2008? No. When the Caltrans relinquished the road? 13 when Caltrans relinquished the road to the city. That was the time when, so it was 8 years ago. That when, no, not done doing the math. Don't worry about it. So that was the time when we really had to listen to the Mesa residents and see what they needed for that road now that the city was in control of that road. So that process has been building for multiple years, and now we're ready to. We brought this to you before we went to the residents. Now we've done that, and we're coming back on our stop to council. So take it away.
Good evening, everyone. As Rob mentioned, my name is Derek Bailey. I'm with the city's traffic engineering group. As Rob mentioned, we've been getting feedback from the Mesa neighborhood for a long time about what they want Cliff Drive to look like. And changes to Cliff Drive was really a driving force for the relinquishment of Cliff Drive from Caltrans. The neighborhood just really felt strongly that the city would be willing to make changes that Caltrans wouldn't. And we're willing to work with them and transform the street into something that's based on their vision. So we've been getting all this feedback ever since 2013, and the thing we keep hearing over and over again are crosswalks, safer bike lanes or bike paths, and better safety for everyone. Cliff Drive is a really fast-moving street. It's a busy street, so when collisions do happen, they tend to be quite severe. And consequently, Cliff Drive is a Vision Zero corridor. Vision Zero is the city's policy that looking into the future, we want to get to a place where severe collisions and fatalities are not happening on city streets. And as long as Cliff Drive is happening or operating the way it is today, severe collisions are likely to continue to repeat themselves just as they have in the past. So all that being said, getting all sorts of feedback from the neighborhood on what they want Cliff Drive to look like. Funding has always been a challenge. The improvements that the neighborhood wants to see are expensive. Crosswalks, bike paths, they're all very expensive features. Each crosswalk would probably cost $200,000 to $300,000. So just order of magnitude, they are going to be quite expensive improvements. So funding has been a challenge. Looking forward to year 2020, we have the next cycle of the Active Transportation Program coming up, and we think that we stand a really good chance of putting forth a successful application for Cliff Drive. And one of the important reasons for that is the Las Positas pathway is going to be under construction next year. And that provides a lot of momentum in that area of town for new active transportation facilities. And we think with an application to the Active Transportation Program, they're going to look really favorably upon Cliff Drive as just a continuation of the new project on Las Positas. So as we were thinking forward to the year 2020 and the application that we're going to be doing, we started doing some outreach this past summer. We wanted to check back in with the neighborhood just to confirm that everything we've been hearing as far as crosswalks and bike paths and safety for all, that's still the case. So in June, we came to you, the Transportation Circulation Committee, just to let you know what our plans are. At the time, right around that same time, the City Council approved some funding for a traffic engineering study of some of the more challenging intersections along Cliff Drive. specifically looking at whether or not roundabouts would be appropriate at some of those intersections. In July, we met with Coast. In July, we got the study results back from the roundabout study, and I'll be talking about that shortly. We met with the Mesa neighborhood in August. We met with Santa Barbara City College Board of Trustees in September, SB Bike in September, and we tried to do some outreach to the businesses near Cliff and Meigs in October. And then a week ago tonight, on October 27th, we had a public workshop to review the concept that was put together. So based on all the feedback that we got over the summer, we heard very strong support for frequent crosswalks, a two-way bike path. That was one of the questions we were wrestling with over the summer, is what's going to be a better facility for the community, one-way bike paths on either side of the road, or a two-way bike path on one side of the road. And we heard pretty loud and clear from the community that they like the idea of a two-way bike path. And we also heard from the community that there is strong support for moving forward with an application next summer. So just a diagram overview of the corridor itself and what we're looking at. The bike path is planned to begin at Hendry's Beach in the western end of the corridor, through the new roundabout where it'll connect to the Las Positas bike path. It'll be under construction in the spring. Up the hill, through the Mesa neighborhood, and all the way over to Castillo Street, so over 3 miles. We're planning, based on feedback from the neighborhood, for 7 new crosswalks and 3 new traffic signals on Cliff Drive, so there'll be a total of 10 better crossing locations than there are today. And we also heard that on Shoreline Drive at Salida del Sol, this is a location that the community would like a better crosswalk to get across the street. There's a entrance to the back of Washington School right up Salida del Sol from that location, and better crosswalk at that location would provide better access between the neighborhood and La Mesa Park. So that is what a two-way bike path will look like. The entire Cliff Drive corridor, it's going to be split about half and half, where the bike path will be down in the street, like is shown right here, separated from traffic by some sort of raised median, like is shown here. This is a bike path in Orange County. And then about half the corridor will look like the Beachway. This is the north side of Cabrillo, East Cabrillo, where the bike path runs along the north side. So it'll be a combined sidewalk and bike path that'll be up at sidewalk level. We will be planning a more generous buffer, though, between traffic and the bike path than is shown here, though. So some of the technical details that we've run into. The roundabouts are not feasible, and I'll show you some pictures and explain why. But this is kind of one of the first opportunities that we've had to say this in public, just that roundabouts are not feasible at the intersections we were studying. Therefore, we're concentrating on traffic signals at those intersections moving forward. Two-way bike path that was strongly supported by the community. It does have some safety challenges that we're going to have to be very mindful of in the design. There's going to be some medians needed on Cliff Drive between Meigs and Camino Calma, and I'll talk more about that in the presentation. And as well, we're looking at raised crosswalks across the stop sign controlled crossings, and I'll show you why as well. So one of the challenging intersections that we looked at with the traffic engineering consultant was Mesa Lane and Flora Vista. The reason this is such a challenging intersection is because it's offset. You can see Mesa Lane comes in about 100 feet west of Flora Vista. Flora Vista is on the top of the screen, and Mesa Lane is on the bottom. What happens at this intersection, the way the traffic signal cycles, is it serves one side of the road, it serves Mesa Lane, and then Flora Vista. And while those two side streets are being served, the light is red for Cliff Drive, and traffic just queues and queues and queues. And if this was just a standard intersection where the streets lined up with one another, that light wouldn't have to be red for so long on Cliff Drive, and the queues wouldn't get so long. The reason that matters is because for space, in order to get a bike path through here, We were really hoping to be able to go down to one lane through this intersection. And it was a desirable feature for the community too, because they felt as though it would create a calmer environment, slower speeds, more safety. But the drawback with going down to one lane with the way this intersection is configured is we're going to end up with 700-foot-long queues during the PM peak. And that's really a tough pill to swallow, and we don't think at the end of the day that that's going to be very well received by the community. So we are looking at maintaining the existing lane configuration going through this intersection. The consultant did sketch together a couple mini roundabouts configuration, but realistically this would probably be quite confusing for the public and wouldn't operate very well. So we quickly moved on from this idea. Another challenging intersection is the driveway at Santa Barbara City College, the West Campus and Cliff Drive. Again, another intersection that we asked the traffic engineering consultant to study for a roundabout. There's basically two options, a roundabout or a traffic signal to improve operations at the intersection. We challenged the consultant to really reduce the footprint of the roundabout as much as possible so that it could fit. And they did that. Apologize for the graphic. The way they did this is they just laid tissue paper over top of an aerial and just began sketching. But even with this reduced footprint roundabout, what we run into is, this is just the roadway edge, this doesn't even include the sidewalks, starts to extend over into the southeast quadrant, and that's a creek habitat area, and the drop-off from the intersection is quite steep through there. So realistically, this just isn't feasible because of the topography in the area. And the most challenging intersection along the corridor is Loma Alta Drive, which is where the yellow crosswalks are surrounding this. There's McKinley School. And as well, this is the main entrance for Santa Barbara City College East Campus. And the driveways to this intersection are really tightly spaced. And there's a curve in the road. It's actually a really awkward layout right now. We asked the traffic engineering consultant if there's a way to try to improve operations at these two tightly spaced intersections. They start off by just taking the template for a roundabout and just kind of plopping it on the intersection just to get an idea of size-wise what we're looking at. And you can see before even digging into too many details, we're getting quite far towards the school. We're getting into some topography issues on the northwest and southwest corners. So right off the bat, we knew this was going to be a challenge just size-wise. And on top of that is the spacing, the really tight spacing to that East Campus driveway. This is a concept they came up with in order to make the intersection operate, or the two intersections operate as one. Functionally, this would probably work really well. But space-wise, this is getting into some challenging topography. This isn't even showing the sidewalks that would surround the intersection, so building those would be a challenge. We'd be definitely getting into some quite significant retaining walls, and this doesn't even accommodate bus stops, which are very busy bus stops serving the East Campus. So given the likely expense with an intersection like this and the limited benefits, we quickly discarded this as well. So all of the locations now, we're focusing on traffic signals instead of roundabouts. So based on all the public feedback and the results of the studies that were done for the roundabouts, we put some sketches together that was our best effort to reflect what the community had told us. And last Thursday, we had a meeting at Monroe Elementary. We pasted all of the sheets together from one end of the multipurpose room to the other, and we just had people go around and look at it and give us their comments. We had some really great feedback. We had a really good turnout. Generally, there was a lot of support for the project. I'm going to walk you through the sections of the corridor and just share with you what we heard. going to start at the western end between Royal Borough, County Park, Henry's Beach, to Mesa Lane. So this is probably the most straightforward section of the project. The roundabout, gosh, my cursor is not working very well. We're envisioning the path will run along the south side of Cliff Drive, past the roundabout. The roundabout was built to accommodate this. We were thinking ahead to this in the future. This will be a location where the path that goes up Las Positas, shown here at the top of the screen, will tie into the path. So pedestrians and cyclists will just use the crosswalks going around the roundabout to get from one pathway to the other. Starting to go up the hill, this is where the Elings Park entrance is off of Cliff Drive. This is a location we did get some feedback. People are wondering, how would I get from the path to the Elings Park entrance? We really don't have a good answer yet. It is an awkward place to cross the road. The road's curving, it's downhill, so speeds are high. We do expect speeds will come down somewhat once we go down to one lane in this section. We are planning both a bike path and on-street bike lanes. The bike lanes will double as a shoulder, an important shoulder for safety and maneuverability for traffic as well. But we don't expect that the higher speed cyclists are going to want to use the bike path and mix with the slower speed users. So especially going up and down the hill here, providing them with a shoulder area that they can use of their own will be important. We did get a question on whether or not parking could be added to this section of Cliff Drive. We did get some feedback that some of the neighbors in the Allen Road neighborhood would like some parking removed in that neighborhood and moved on to Cliff Drive instead as a way to maintain coastal access. Upon looking closer at it, there just doesn't appear to be enough room here, and there's probably some downsides to having parking on Cliff Drive as well. Besides the space issues, it might become an attractive nuisance. It is an awkward street to accommodate parking on, just given the speeds and traffic, so it's not something that we're going to be pursuing. So just summarizing this segment, we got feedback that we should add crosswalk flashers at Allen Road. Very reasonable request, and we're going to incorporate that into the plan. I brought up the parking on Cliff east of the roundabout. There were some questions about whether or not we should have trees and that median separation between the bike path and Cliff Drive. That's something that once we move into the design phase and we have a landscape architect on board and the project is being reviewed by the Architectural Board of Review, that'll get sorted out. And people are concerned about traffic speeds. And that's a common theme throughout the corridor, traffic speeds. Mesa Lane to Mohawk, so this is that intersection at Mesa Lane and Flora Vista. And as I mentioned, the challenge with going down to one lane through this intersection is going to be queuing, and we expect 700-foot-long queues will happen during the PM peak if we go down to one lane. The trade-off is that we are going to lose a few parking spaces by maintaining two lanes in between Cooper and Mohawk, which is in this area in the bottom right-hand side of the screen. We did get some comments from the public that they would prefer to see those parking spaces maintained, and that would mean going down to one lane, and the trade-off would be the really long queues. So that's something we're wrestling with right now. It would be our recommendation to go with this type of traffic configuration, but that's something, a detail that can be worked out during design as to whether or not we maintain parking or go down to one lane, but it is a pretty significant sacrifice in capacity at the intersection. What we heard about this intersection, that it's confusing, so there are some things that we can do to make it more obvious. There are some things that we can do to make it safer as well, and we will incorporate that into the project. Talked about the loss of parking and how some residents would prefer us go down to one lane in each direction. And the center turn lane that would be incorporated into the project was strongly supported. We did have some options for connections to Monroe School, At the public meeting that we had in the summer that we attended at the Mesa, there were some questions about, well, how are we going to get from Monroe School to the path? And so we took a closer look at that. Apologize for the scale here, but this is Flora Vista. This is the main entrance to Monroe School. So our idea is to widen the sidewalk along the east side of Monroe. Currently, Flora Vista is about 40 feet wide. It's about 4 feet wider than a standard city street, so we could pretty easily widen that sidewalk from 5 to 9 feet and still have a standard width city street. We could even plant some trees in the parking aisle to provide some separation from between the sidewalk and moving traffic, and that was pretty well supported. Also supported was some curb extensions at the Red Rose and Flora Vista intersection. We heard a lot of comments from people that drivers come flying down the hill on Flora Vista and the stop sign compliance isn't very good, so that would help. And then the other thing that we are proposing is to do some sidewalk infill on Red Rose between Fellowship and almost all the way to Flora Vista. There's only about 100 feet of sidewalk and then it just ends. These homes, they all face into the cul-de-sac, and this curb that's along the south side of Red Rose, once you're beyond that curb, it just drops down into people's backyards pretty rapidly. So we would actually have to build the sidewalk within the existing roadway footprint. But again, this is a 40-foot wide road. We could build a narrow 5-foot wide sidewalk, maintain parking on both sides, which we heard overflow parking for the school, especially during school events, is important here. This got good feedback too, but maintaining parking was something important to folks in this section. So what we heard, better sidewalks along Flora Vista supported. The sidewalk infill along Red Rose was supported, but parking should be maintained. And the intersection crosswalk improvements in Red Rose were also strongly supported. Between Mohawk and Lighthouse, this is getting to the section near the shopping center. This is at Oliver, and this is a standard intersection configuration that we're planning. Due to some of the safety issues associated with a two-way bike path, we are recommending that if the project moves forward, that we include raised crosswalks at the intersections. And that's going to be important to improve visibility of cyclists and pedestrians, but also to slow drivers down as they're going across the path. This shows a new crosswalk at Oliver, which was strongly supported. And as well, this shows a bus pocket. And this is pretty typical of our concept designs along the corridor, having crosswalks near bus stops. This is an example of a raised crosswalk. This is a pedestrian-only raised crosswalk. This is an example likely of what our project would look like. So this shows a slight raise as the bike path goes through the intersection. Of course, it's got the green highlights to improve visibility. This section here in front of the shopping center, we got the most feedback for this section, and this is probably the most complicated section within the project. This section between Camino Calma, which is the intersection on the left-hand side of the screen, and Miggs, which is the intersection on the right-hand side of the screen, currently has the highest concentration of collisions in the corridor. So we've already got safety issues going on in this section, and we need to be very sensitive about introducing a bike path, because we could be introducing some new safety problems. So we need to take steps to correct the existing safety problems and protect users that are going to be on the bike path. In looking at the collision pattern, a lot of the collisions are involving drivers pulling out of private driveways trying to turn left. And just thinking about introducing a bike path into the mix and potential users of that bike path, eliminating those left turns from the private drives is really something that we need to do to protect users of the path and to get rid of that existing collision pattern, just to make the whole area safer. We do that by building medians down the middle of this section. There would be opportunities to turn left into businesses, but leaving businesses, they would have to go down to the next intersection And for example, with the shopping center, they could exit onto Camino Calma and turn left at a new traffic signal. Or if they're along the south side, they could turn right and make a U-turn at the intersection. So that is a pretty big change. We did get a lot of comments and concerns about that, but it's really an essential feature to this project. And if we can't make this section safe, we don't have a project. We can't move forward. So we hear the concerns, and that's the trade-off, is in order to move forward with this project, we need to do something about the safety issues here. Oh, this didn't show up very well. This is an aerial diagram that shows the existing collisions that are happening over a recent 5-year period out there. And what this is trying to illustrate is all of the collisions, and many of them are involving people trying to turn left from the private driveways. And it is a busy area, so it stands to reason that when you're trying to turn left into a busy street, that there are going to be collisions. And in fact, that is showing up. So just summarizing again what we heard, most comments were in this section, concerns about the medians. We did get just a general comment that there needs to be more bike parking in the area with the shopping center, and certainly if we were to build a bike path, which we would expect to be very successful, the need for bike parking would increase. And there was support for a new traffic signal at Camino Calma at the western end of the shopping center. Lighthouse to Oceano. Again, a typical layout. This is at Salida del Sol. So this is again, just north of the back entrance to Washington Elementary. New crosswalk, which was very well supported, and again, a bus pullout, so this would provide good access for the bus stop as well. The parkway in this area, we could have a widened parkway, probably 8 or 9 feet wide, separating the bike path from moving traffic. And with the parkway that wide, we could introduce some street trees, which would probably have a calming effect on the corridor. Across the streets from Santa Fe, this section right here, it's about 600 feet long, and it does have the highest density of private driveways. So there wouldn't be an opportunity to have much for street trees in this area if we were to maintain parking. We assumed that most of the homeowners along here would want to maintain parking in front of their homes. There were some concerns about how would we back out of our driveway across a bike path. And so that's something we'll have to work with the homeowners on. We don't expect any technical challenges, just more a matter of familiarization. So what we heard in this section, there was strong support for the new crosswalks. There were concerns about maneuvering in and out of private driveways across the bike path. And there was a concern over the narrowing of side streets at the bike path. And actually, I'm just going to back up so I can illustrate that. I forgot to mention that. This is at Salida del Sol. You can see we are necking the intersection down slightly. Again, that's an essential feature to this project. These crossings of major driveways and intersections are where conflicts are going to happen, and we need to make sure they're as safe as possible. What we don't want to have happen is somebody trying to turn left from one of the side streets, waiting, and somebody passing them on the right. And we all do it, rolling through stop signs. We try not to. But if somebody's trying to turn left and somebody were to roll through a stop sign as a pathway user, we're going through the intersection, that would be a really bad mix. So again, this is another essential feature of the project for safety, but there were comments about that. Oceano to the Santa Barbara City College East Campus. So this is Oceano here. A new crosswalk proposed, was very well supported. The pathway along this section would be up at sidewalk level, so it would be combined with the sidewalk, be really generously wide. We could probably have about a 15 to 16 foot wide pathway through this section. Lighting is probably extra important in this section, given students and evening classes, just to make them feel comfortable. And a new traffic signal at the City College West Campus driveway. This is the Loma Alta intersection, the existing traffic signal. This section is where we have to open back up to 2 lanes in each direction just for traffic capacity reasons. Because we need to maintain most of the width on Cliff Drive, we would have to get into the berm that's along the south side of the road. But the city does have plenty of right-of-way along there. We could build a really wide parkway. We could have trees straddling the pathway. Again, it could be wide, 14 feet. So this could be a really great place to walk and bike along. And this is, again, Loma Alta and the City College East Campus driveway where there would be a new traffic signal. Some changes here. One of the things that we heard from City College is the existing bus stop. There's a bus pullout westbound Cliff Drive just before the intersection. When students get off the bus, they come across the intersection. There's quite a mass of them. And what they do is they enter the college campus and they walk down the driveway in front of the admin building. City College staff, they're quite concerned about the safety of their students. It is a busy driveway, so there's quite a mix of deliveries, access to one of their main parking areas, and introducing pedestrians into that area. They do have some concerns. They would prefer students to be over here on the right-hand side of the screen, which guides pedestrians more into the main entrances where the classrooms are. So the concept would be to actually eliminate the crosswalk on this side, move the bus stop closer to that new traffic signal at the East Campus driveway, and have the crosswalk here. They would cross and they would enter the college campus closer to where City College is trying to get people to walk. In that space where the bus pocket was, we could fill it in, landscape it, trees. We could widen the sidewalk for a few hundred feet up to McKinley School, which would create a better walking environment from the Lower West neighborhood to McKinley School. The bus stop for eastbound would be maintained in the existing location. The path would meander around it. There's some existing visibility problems exiting this driveway when there are buses stopped here. So this traffic signal would correct that. So keeping the bus stop there with convenient access right into the campus would work really well. What we heard in this section, there was strong support for the new traffic signals. And there was concern for, there was one private driveway near Oceano, again, maneuvering across the bike path, but that's something we can address.
Mr.
And
Chair, could I ask a question?
Yes.
On those lights, that sort of double Loma Alta and at the entrance, correct me if I'm wrong, but those will be together, they'll cycle together, is that right? Making that up.
Committee Member Lackerby, yes. Given the really tight spacing of these two intersections, there'd have to be really good coordination between them. So if a driver on Cliff Drive drives through the first intersection, we'd want them to clear the second intersection. We would run into red light running problems if we didn't provide for that. So that'll be an essential feature, good coordination between those two traffic signals. And finally, the final section, the East Campus driveway to Castillo Street. So this is what we call the viaduct section. So along the north side of Cliff Drive right here, that's the giant retaining wall, and the Lower West neighborhood sits at a lower elevation. We would have to go down to one lane going uphill. We would maintain 2 lanes going downhill. That would be important for capacity. This eastbound movement going towards Castillo Street gets quite busy during the PM peak, and just for stacking reasons alone, we would need to maintain the 2 lanes. But by going down to 1 lane uphill, that would provide us with enough room to widen the pathway to, I think, about 14 feet and provide a parkway for some separation. It seems like lighting would be a good feature in this section as well. This is the Rancheria intersection, so this would provide a connection point from the pathway to the new bike lanes that were recently installed on Rancheria. and this is the section approaching Castillo Street. We would have to maintain the existing number of traffic lanes in this area just due to capacity reasons. But all the lanes that are out there right now are quite wide. They were built to Caltrans standards many years ago. We think we can gain about 8 feet of street width, so we could widen the sidewalk and provide a small parkway in this area by adding 8 feet to the existing sidewalk. The path would end at Castillo Street. At this location, we envision short-term there being a left turn staging bike box so that cyclists could go up Castillo Street. A little bit longer term, we do have a funded project through the Measure A program to study Castillo Street and improve the connection between Haley through this area. So we do anticipate future improvements will tie into this. So what we heard for this section, there's concern about the Castillo connections. And obviously, we see this as a short-term solution, and long-term, we would improve the connections up and down Castillo Street. And there was good support for a connection into the Lower West neighborhood. Not on the Cliff Drive corridor, but again, I mentioned there's a neighborhood desire for a better crosswalk at Shoreline and Salida del Sol. So we showed this to the neighborhood at the meeting last Thursday, and there was good support for that crosswalk as well. So that completes my presentation. I'm just going to walk you through where we go from here. So we're in fall 2019. There's some tweaks. There's minor tweaks that we need to do to the design based on the feedback that we received. There's going to be continuing public outreach. We've received a lot of emails and feedback even since the meeting last week, so we're going to be continuing to communicate with residents. We have some coordination to do with MTD, City College, and SB Unified School District as well, just to make sure that those features are dialed in heading into the grant application. By February, we expect to go to City Council so that they give their approval for us moving forward with the grant application. Spring, we're going to be preparing that grant application, and by December next year, we'll know the results. And we expect success so that by summer of 2021, we'll be moving into design, and it'll probably take about 4 years to design and deliver. So with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions. I apologize. I moved pretty quick. This has been it's a long corridor, and there is a lot of stuff along it. So even at the public meeting last week, you know, it was a lot for people to take in, and we're continuing to get emails asking questions. Hey, I thought of this. So, but overall, the response has been really great.
Thank you. It's so comprehensive. I'm very impressed, and I'm going to say one thing, and then I'll open it to public comment and to the other board members. The raised medians, I think, is a great solution to increase safety in front of the shopping area, but it's just one of many improvements. You're to be commended for the comprehensive nature from Hendry's to Castillo. It's a big undertaking. Any other comments from TCC members? Questions? Me? Yes.
Well, thank you so much for that, and it is overwhelming to hear that so fast. You know, for so much covering so many intersections, everything. But I live on the Mesa and have been hit twice in the last several years by someone turning left, and including about 2 weeks ago at Camino Calma. So this is really practical, and the numbers of the accidents is like way higher than you have records of, because when I got hit that way, someone was turning left right in front of me and ran right into me. Called the police, and they couldn't take the call because there were no injuries, and they had 11 calls before ours, so we didn't have the police come, obviously, so there's no police record. So just to validate that is a really difficult area, that whole area there, especially left turns, and it feels to me like it's gotten so much more traffic in the last year and a half. And I don't know if that's true, but I know I have to wait a lot longer to turn to come out of those driveways in that area. And I'm just so happy that this is in process because it's so needed. And like I say, 2 accidents where I was hit, in the last couple of years. It's more dangerous than you even think. So thanks for your work.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Horn. Mr. Remus, is this the point that you'd like to make your comment? Thank you.
Oh, Kara, can I ask you a favor? Would you mind bringing up the slide of the at this Loma Alta intersection for the new design? Good evening, committee members and chair. My name is Barry Remis, and I'm with COAST, the Coalition for Sustainable Transportation. And it's even more of a challenge to make a comment on this comprehensive plan in 2 minutes. But wow, this is really impressive. And we have to say that I'm hoping I'm speaking on behalf of the board and all the staff at COAST that we wholeheartedly support your decision to move this forward to City Council. We really want to applaud the staff for totally embracing the Vision Zero policy and strategy and the mantra behind it. They've really come out with guns blazing with respect to trying to take every opportunity as possible to really be able to apply Vision Zero principles in maximizing our pedestrian, bicyclist, and motor vehicleist safety here, just all road users. Specifically, we really want to encourage your endorsement of the safety improvements to improve access at our schools, both Monroe and McKinley, the ability to be able to widen sidewalks, to be able to implement curb extensions, really can help improve our safe routes to school access, which we really applaud that. At this end, it's amazing just to see what really I'm going to call this Class 1 multi-use path, because I look at this as, we look at this as more than just a bike path, but obviously it's multi-users that'll be traversing this entire corridor from Henry's Beach all the way down to Castillo, and it's just fantastic to see this really come to fruition on this design. One element or one suggestion I'd like to point out is at the new intersection, where the new traffic signals might be, especially at the east entrance, the main entrance to City College. If on the eastbound, I think I'm getting this right, the eastbound bus stop on the ocean side of the street, since there will be obviously pedestrian and bicyclist traffic on the multi-use path, the bike path, we would anticipate or hope that we would somehow try to prevent bus riders, students, et cetera, as they exit the bus from traversing that multi-use path to enter the front of the university, the City College. So we're hoping that they will move over to the crosswalk, cross Meigs, and then enter the entrance of the college. So in the design, if there's a way to help with screening, landscaping, et cetera, so that they don't just simply run across the multi-use path, unless they want to walk on the multi-use path to get there, then that's another option too. We just want to optimize the safety there would be great to avoid conflicts. But overall, this is a wonderful plan. We applauded all the lighting as well to really take this to that complete streets level. Even though this isn't such an urban setting, to really incorporate both the lighting, the landscaping, the trees where possible, and potentially even to, I don't know if it's scope creep, but to also maybe consider little parklets type areas where, benches and furniture could be added to really give this much really such the community vibe that it well deserves. And I would imagine that might be embraced by the community as well. But we encourage your support of this plan to move it forward, and we really look forward to it coming to fruition. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Reeves. Ms. Horn, please.
Okay, just one more thing that I've noticed over the years is there's no bike parking where I need to go on the Mesa. and I don't see it hardly anywhere. And like if I want to go to the grocery store, there's no parking there. I can't lock my bike anywhere. And I look around and I don't see any places hardly at all to park up there. So I see that there's one little note about someone put in about parking, and I just wondered what is the situation with getting some parking for bikes?
Committee Member Horton, that's a great question. We're limited as to what we can do on private property unless there's some redevelopment that happens that would trigger the need for more. But given the generous width that we might have at some of our parkway locations out there, it certainly seems like adding more parking adjacent to businesses is certainly a possibility. And that's something we're going to be studying based on that feedback.
Great. I like to see benches and things, but bikes, that doesn't help biking. So, thanks.
Thank you, Committee Member Horn. Are there any other? Ms. Blackerby?
Thank you. First of all, congratulations. Well, I shouldn't congratulate you yet. You'll go get the grant. I don't congratulate you. But this is really, it feels like it's just the beginning, but for those of us who've been, working on this since back when we were trying to get the relinquishment to happen, this is a really big milestone, and so we should all be really proud of this. And especially the team and engineering and planning and stuff that went into building this. I attended the workshop at Monroe last week, and to see the whole extent of it laid out on the table is amazing. It's I see why you didn't want all these lane miles under city care at first, but now the beautiful thing is you're going to get to do all these things if funded. The other thing that's super important about this, and you all are so good at getting these ATP grants, and I say this every single time, but, once you get this, with the way the decennial census is going to change things, most likely the city's going to get thrown into the big pond. We're the big fish in the small pond that keeps taking everybody's money, so they think, from other jurisdictions, right? And so we've gotten pretty far on it, but we're going to be competing against really big areas with much larger planning and engineering staffs than this city has. So fingers crossed, knocking on wood, really hopeful that, and you have a good system of scoring your own projects and everything, but really needs community support to make sure that this happens, and to link it up with the project that got funded from ATP for Las Positas. So it's really exciting. I appreciate the work that staff has done, both out in the community speaking to homeowners, but also all the stakeholders, because there's so many in this area. And it's my hope that this project queues up for City College to do something with their terrible layout of the front of their campus. They admit this as well, right? But the circulation on campus, if we queue this up, this is all fine and dandy, but it's still bad just past the public right-of-way, so, or the city right-of-way. So I'm hopeful that they will, take this to maybe, if this is funded, go along and have a kind of parallel design process, which would be great. So I know there's still some details, what Mr. Remus mentioned about kind of all the details about how pedestrians flow and bikes flow in this area, but I'm sure that'll get worked out with your final kind of meetings and everything. So I just want to say congratulations and good luck, and look forward to celebrating not just the ribbon cutting many years from now, but when it is funded.
Thank you, Ms. Blackerby. Any other committee members wish to speak to this or have a question? Mr. France?
Sure. Actually, if I could ask a question before some comments. Could we go back real quick, Mr. Bailey, to maybe the second from last snapshot where Rancheria Street terminates? I know we had talked about this a little bit. I'm thinking about the interface between City College, like Mrs. Ms. Blackerby had pointed out of City College is part of the bargain in terms of that all these investments. So so right now, the challenge for Rancheria is getting to City College either through all the way around Castillo down to Shoreline, or City College has been trying to do some work basically just at the bottom left edge of that on that path. Could you say just a little bit more about that potential connectivity, utilizing like a sort of left turn and then utilizing the path and then shifting off of the path onto where there is some bike parking currently at Santa Barbara City College, and then also an unpaved connector?
Committee Member France, thank you. Currently along the south side of, well, this is Cliff Drive where it turns into Montecito Street, but on the south side of this intersection, the only thing that's there is about a 4-foot wide sidewalk, and it's really narrow and it's uncomfortable. And off the back side of the path, there's a railing, but it drops off into a really shallow drainage area. This would widen the sidewalk area to about 13 feet. So it would be quite generous in width to be a lot more comfortable. You know, if you're waiting at the intersection trying to get to Rancheria Street, or if you're on Rancheria Street coming down towards City College, there'd be a really generous area accepting pedestrians or cyclists. And just immediately west of this intersection, there is a landing area kind of at the bottom of the hill from City College, and it's quite well used bike parking area. It's also a space where the path takes off up the hill, so it seems like there's good opportunity there for future connections, both alongside Pershing Park and up into the campus area.
And this project certainly would probably do a curb cut at the very least.
Down in this area? Yeah, I would expect it all to be quite flush and permeable between. Yep.
I have more comments, but this not going to be a good related comment to this.
Please continue, Mr. France.
So first off, if I could just be sentimental for a moment. If I could just be sentimental for a moment. I remember the Mesa neighborhood talking about this concept like 15 years ago, and people were thinking about using the current median and just like putting a multi-use path like down the median. It was all very like, you know, we could do something, but the technical element was totally lacking, right? Because you couldn't just run a Class 1 bike path down the middle of a 4-lane roadway. But the vision from the community was there. I think that much like Ms. Grant and the transportation team presented to the County Association of Governments, TTAC, you know, is a Transportation Technical Advisory Committee, on like, hey, this is how we're approaching ATP grants. I think like this project would be a great presentation of here's how we're approaching the neighborhood and the public process, both from a technical and from a, you know, just resident outreach and customer outreach standpoint. Because I think the steps that you laid out for a grant that we're going to apply for are pretty amazing. And I think it really reflects like a great example of working with the community, something that's that earnest community desire that you all now have the technical capacity to potentially deliver. So thank you. I think this is really an amazing project for the Mesa neighborhood and for the California Coastal Trail. I think that it's also a great way for the city to honor Santa Barbara City College's commitment to being a multimodal campus and really improving bike, transit, and walking mode share. I think this is really going to help deliver and honor the investments that they've made in their, is it the TAP program, Transportation Alternatives at Santa Barbara City College? SBCC Commute. SBCC Commute has been great for faculty and staff and for students, and that's something that I think this is going to just help take to the next level. Quite a lot of technical challenges, but I really appreciate how you all have shown how you've looked at what's feasible and what's not, and please include that in the presentation to TTAC in terms of like, hey, you said, check this out. We did. Here were the results. And it's amazing how often that doesn't happen in transportation planning and in community outreach. People just feel like their ideas went into a black hole. And you just demonstrating like, we looked at this and here's why we can't do it has bought, I think, a ton of community credibility and trust. And so thank you. Honestly, I think there's like a thoroughness to the process that is paying off. There's nobody with, there's no angry mob with pitchforks here because the community feels heard and included. I definitely think this is a great connection off of the project about to come on Las Positas and Modoc. And I'm also very eager for the project on Castillo between Haley and Montecito because these are areas that are very heavy with pedestrians and bikes and people trying to get to the beach and the city college and the harbor. And so I think that this investment of time and process is very well placed, and good luck.
Thank you, Mr. France. Ms. Blackerby.
Seeing this intersection again reminded me, I really like the kind of skip track green lane piece of this. And it made me think, and I've brought it up with you before, but in the extents of the project back up cliff that are sort of longer where it's just like, lanes. There's not a bunch of, there's driveways, but there's not a bunch of, it's pretty much residential on both sides. The thing that keeps hanging me up and that I think about, especially for, with a facility like this, you're hoping it's not just the intrepid, cyclists who will bike anywhere, right? But that it's families and things like that. Or just people who are a little less sure, and they may get more sure the more they bike. The thing that keeps coming up for me is if you're on the bike path and you're wanting to get home, work, whatever, you're wanting to get back home, say, and you live on the north side of Cliff, are there going to be, there are obviously a couple of crosswalks, new crosswalks, and some intersections with lights, although there's a really long extent where there's no lights, right? Is there going to be obvious signage or markings that make it clear to those cyclists how they should cross the street? We know what we'd like for them to do, probably, or what they could do, but as we know, human behavior doesn't always follow that. So I just want to make it as clear as possible and find out in other areas, other cities, what kind of treatments have they used to make this so that you don't go, oh God, what do I need to get in the lane? Do I have to dismount, walk up half a block along Cliff Drive block and cross at the crosswalk? Probably most people aren't going to do that. That's what I'm curious about, and that's what I'm thinking about, what would I do, even though I'm pretty confident on my bike. Did anyone bring that up at me? Am I the only one who thinks this? And also, have you seen other treatments in other places where it makes it clearer what people should do or what we want them to do?
Community Member Blackerby, you are the only one that's brought it up, but it's a valid concern. There are going to be frequent crosswalks that we would hope people use. They're generally going to be every 500 to 700 feet apart, so it's not going to be nearly as long between good crossing points on Cliff Drive as there is right now. But as far as a specific treatment to encourage cyclists to use that, or what to do at locations where there aren't a crosswalk, we haven't quite wrapped our heads around that yet. Once we get into design, we are going to do a more comprehensive look at other facilities and other jurisdictions and latch on to any best practices that we can find from them.
Because this intersection kind of made me think, oh, interesting. It has that. It's pretty close on the west side there. Pretty close. The skip track thing is pretty close to the intersection of kind of having a, for lack of a better term, like a bike crosswalk right up against the ped crosswalk that at least shows people, one, shows motorists, hey, there might be a bike crossing here, and two, you know, cyclists, like, maybe go here, don't plow through the pedestrians, and maybe you don't have to dismount. So I don't know if that's able to be used in those other places, but it's the first thing I've seen where I'm like, oh, maybe that could work. So
One of the challenges is generally along the north side of Cliff Drive, there aren't a lot of really busy side streets. There's Rancheria, there's Loma Alta. In between Loma Alta and Meigs, the side streets are generally really short and rather quiet. So they're not going to have bike facilities heading up them. They're probably not going to have a really high demand from them. So the demand is really stretched out over a long area. So we're going to have to be thoughtful about how best to do that.
awesome. Thanks.
Thank you, Ms. Blackery. Mr. Bailey, are there any other comments or questions from the committee? Thank you very much for your presentation. We were to hear the presentation. There will be no action taken at this time, as I understand it.
That's correct, Mr. Chair.
We move on then to the West Side and Lower West Side Neighborhoods Transportation Management Plan.
Mr. Chair, committee members, so we have in Public Works, we have been doing really interesting work with neighborhoods, and you may recall the success we had with the East Side neighborhood, where we did a plan with them, a neighborhood plan, and walked through them in a process, and then there's been almost $20 million invested in that neighborhood since that time over decades, and a lot of things that came out of that were the active transportation planning grants that happened on the east side that came out of that neighborhood planning process. So we set out to do a neighborhood planning process on the west side for similar preparation for the active transportation planning grants, and then also just for the Vision Zero strategy that we're putting together is now everything that's our banner is Vision Zero strategy. How do we reduce serious injury collisions and deaths that result in traffic collisions? So we continue that work, and Jessica Grant will walk you through the whole process and what we did. And this is on a stop to City Council. That we would be going to them at the end of this year to have them officially and formally approve the plan for the west side.
Thank you.
Okay. Chair Hodges and committee members, good evening. Jessica Grant, Supervising Transportation Planner. We just had a journey through the Mesa, and now I'm going to take you on a journey through the West Side and Lower West Side neighborhoods this evening. And we have been on this journey through the West Side and Lower West Side since March is when we announced the planning effort. And these planning efforts are designed on purpose to move through community input and action in a short amount of time. And what I'm excited tonight is really we've got to the milestone of the actual draft plan. So it's very exciting. The meeting purpose tonight is to find the plan consistent with the city's Vision Zero strategy, a circulation element, pedestrian master element, and bicycle master plan, and hopefully to move the plan forward to City Council for approval. And just for those that may be watching at home, just to define the West Side and Lower West neighborhoods, the West Side neighborhood is roughly bounded to the north by Las Positas, to the east by Highway 101, south of Carrillo Street, and on the west, basically one of the entrances to back neighborhood entrance to Ealing Park along Valerio. Lower West neighborhood, it's the northern boundary where it meets up with the west side is along Carrillo Street, followed by, again, Highway 101 to the east, Montecito Street to the south, and along the westerly boundary of San Andres and Loma Alta. And really the whole purpose of this planning effort is to respond to neighborhood livability by addressing pedestrian, bicycle, and traffic-related concerns, and also implementing the city's Vision Zero strategy. So where we're in the planning effort, there's to get to the physical plan itself, as we first began with the neighborhood to hold a listening workshop that was held in April of this year. We also followed up with a supplemental survey for residents to either add additional comments since the listening workshop, or those that couldn't attend the workshop to participate in a survey, as well as people contacted me, mostly via email as well. And then as a separate and parallel process, we were doing the Vision Zero traffic safety analysis. All of those three components fed into the approaches, and that's when we returned back to the community in June to say, okay, do these approaches, do they address your concerns in addition to what we were seeing in the collision patterns? We received comments again at that approach workshop, and then basically over the summertime began for staff just to synthesize everything into a plan that that you have before you tonight. And again, this is just the cover of the draft plan, but it really, besides getting to infrastructure improvements, it really describes the whole process that we went through. So how the neighborhood participated, all the input they provided, again, our Vision Zero analysis, and then a safety prioritized action plan. I have recapped this in prior meetings, but I did want to, again, touch base on the neighborhood input. So this is just some images from the workshop that was held in April. These are the themes that we discussed with the residents, that we sought feedback on with driving, walking, bicycling, neighborhood lighting, transit, and parking. The image to the right is just an example of one exhibit that we use just to as a base map for residents to provide feedback on. And what we heard from the listening workshop was there was rules of the road concerns, there was difficulty navigating certain intersections within the neighborhoods, there was maintenance issues, infrastructure needs, and parking concerns. Not going to read that. That's just out of the plan where we discussed the various themes that that came out of the survey. A lot of the themes that came out of the survey essentially affirmed what we were hearing in the listening workshop. And then the Vision Zero safety analysis. What did we find with the collision data, and what were the themes? So I'll spend a few moments to discuss those. This is an example. This is something typical that we've done and that you've seen just citywide of the heat map. This is specific to both of the Lower West and West Side neighborhoods. And the heat map just shows the red color is where you would see most collisions, followed by the orange, yellow, and then green areas. again, where there had been documented collisions. The areas in white is where we didn't have any records of collisions. And you can see here the predominant areas of collisions happening in these neighborhoods is along Carrillo Street, specifically Carrillo and San Andres, and then also at the intersection of San Andres and Mitchell-Torena, where there is an existing traffic signal at that location. As far as for the Mitchell-Torena and San Andres intersection, that was the highest number of pedestrian-involved collisions. And this is where there's about at least over 200 crossings per day at this particular intersection. And going to the Carrillo and San Andres, I'll talk to it. There's, besides that, we have just a general heat map of collisions, but we also take it one step further. Is there anything also happening for nighttime collisions? The yellow dots happen just there. They seem fairly prominent. It's just the street lighting that exists there. It's not the collisions. Yes, not the collisions. But what came out of that is the Carrillo and San Andres. There was the highest frequency of injury-related crashes at nighttime, and the pattern was broadside collisions at that intersection. Mission was another area where there is collisions. It was, again, if you compared it, a little bit cooler daytime, or just overall, but there wasn't a detectable pattern other than those particular collisions were DUI related. And then comparing our Vision Zero traffic safety analysis heat map, and then we also overlaid, what were we hearing from the community to see if there was any overlap in from the data and what we were hearing. And I would say that it was pretty well correlated to what we were seeing in the collision data. So again, with what we've heard, the Vision Zero analysis then becomes then the actual sort of then meat of the plan, and that we have a Vision Zero focus, and I'll go in a little bit more detail what that means, and then what are the short-term and near-term improvements, because this isn't, although we're having a stop point listening from the community right now, we always are working in community, and so there is already things that we're addressing that I also wanted to document in the plan narrative as well. And when I go over some of the improvements, I'll be discussing what is happening in the next 1 to 2 years, and then other like longer term improvements that do not have capital funding. And then what would it look like in terms of plan implementation to try to get funding for projects that we see emerging? So Vision Zero focus, I know we've talked about it a lot this past year with a lot of the projects that you've seen before you, but it's really Vision Zero is to eliminate all severe and fatal transportation-related collisions in the city, and to prioritize transportation safety. I do want to read that there are 7 core principles that we have related to Vision Zero. And first is life is most important. Every person matters. People make mistakes. Focus on dangerous locations and behaviors. Drivers have critical responsibility. Pedestrians and cyclists are the most vulnerable road users, and the government shares responsibility for safe streets. So with those core principles in mind, that really help set the foundation as we move forward with improving the West Side. and Lower West neighborhoods. So what we found, there was three sort of emerging strategies to address, again, with the Vision Zero analysis and what we heard. The strategies are not in any particular order, but the first one is improvements to make a walking experience safer and more inviting. So the areas in green are near term, 1 to 2 years of being implemented in the neighborhoods. I will just quickly pause on a few of them. So Carrillo and San Andres, yes, we have documented a collision pattern history. We have received funding already. We're in design to improve that intersection. That was community was very happy that that's intersection is under design and hoping to see improvements very soon. And really that we'd have traffic signal improvements to have left turn arrows. Also, if you're familiar with that intersection, it's at a skew. It's pedestrians have a lot of exposure in the roadway, so it also calls for curb extensions to shorten that exposure and realigning a little of those crossing areas. So we're trying to have the minimal crossing distance. And we're also looking at a crossing improvement too along Carrillo and San Pasqual associated with that project. If I take just a journey a little bit south into the Lower West, there at the corners of Ortega, San Pasqual, Ortega, and Coda streets and intersections, that was something that we also heard a lot about. And the short-term proposal there is associated with what some of our pavement maintenance projects is to install curb extensions there to, again, help with pedestrian mobility. And then there's also some lighting improvements. I'll discuss too in a second for along Carrillo for some upcoming lighting that's also associated with that project. There's some other improvements at Mission and Gillespie that's associated with bicycle boulevards that are also in design right now that I'll discuss in a couple more slides. So what's the remaining stuff? The issue and the greatest, I would say, levels of stress that we heard from the community and then documented in the collision data is crossing San Andres. It's just a very it's the main commercial corridor, and the west side a lot is going on. So if you see those purple dots along San Andres, we are recommending curb extensions at those locations, and also installing pedestrian rapid flashing beacons. Along Chino Street, we are recommending pedestrian refuge islands to also help, again, just to ease the stresses walking through the neighborhood. What we heard most about for sidewalk infill, Valerio received a lot of comments at the workshops, and there's sidewalk in some locations, others not, but it is really, we keep hearing over and over a need to infill sidewalk along that entire corridor all the way to getting to Ealings Park. It's just because there is the draw of Ealings Park there, that just to have a separated facility for pedestrians. And then, of course, the other direction, if you live on that street and you go to Harding Elementary, again, to have sidewalks along your route to school is very important. Then there's just other indicated in red would be accessibility improvements such as access ramp and some other pieces of sidewalk infill that we wanted to also reflect in the plan. Moving on to the second strategy is neighborhood lighting improvements to enhance walking, biking, and driving experience. As I mentioned, with the improvements at San Andres and Carrillo, it is also a very large corridor lighting project for street lighting. So it would start all the way at Bass Street go under the freeway, which we've heard for not only this time for outreach, but for many years of the lack of street lighting in that intersection, and just as you approach the freeway. And then it would go all the way uphill to the Alta Mesa area. So very big improvement coming soon. For San Andreas, there's lots of street lighting. Here's the problem. There's a beautiful tree canopy also along that stretch as well. And we looked at, can the street lights get lower? But there's also lots of utilities on those lines. And then there's franchise agreements. And it's not so easy to relocate the street light to lower it because then you'd be in violation with all the other utilities that are on there. So what do you do? Well, we need to bring the lighting lower. There's a need for pedestrian lighting. And so really that's what we reflected as a need in the plan. Again, we're proposing to have those strong crossing improvements, but we need the pedestrian level lighting to go with it. And then we also heard this was sort of I don't have the Edison lighting map. Most of the lights in this neighborhood are Edison lights. There was lighting recently upgraded. All the Edison lights went from high pressure sodium to LED lighting, which was a big improvement. But then there's still gaps within the existing street lighting structure. Highlighted in this sort of green box area is between Mission and Islay streets and Gillespie and Chino streets. And so it'd be working with Edison to, where there's poles, where there's no lighting, to erect a light or a new Edison pole as well. So did we get everything for lighting requests for the neighborhood reflected on here? Not everything. These were sort of the main takeaway points, but we still see in what we tried to reflect in the plan, that there's still going to be sprinkles of lighting needs that we have. And that just as we receive funding, hopefully to make improvements in this neighborhood, that we're still continuing to look at some of the adjacent streets. For example, some of the areas for needed lighting center around near the Boys and Girls Club and Bonnet Park. So I do want to iterate that it's not forgotten. And so narratively, I tried to make reference to that in the plan. So the last strategy is bicycle improvements to create safer routes to school and work. What we've heard already, because we had a pretty robust outreach as part of the bicycle master plan, and then continued to be affirmed with this outreach process as well, is to have a really good north-south connection along just the west side and lower west neighborhoods to get to schools, get to the beach. And then we also heard that there's needs to be a very strong connection leaving the west side, going to downtown and to subsequent neighborhoods like the east side. What I wanted to touch on is we did receive an active transportation grant, and that we are currently under the traffic analysis and concept design stage for that project. That would put a stronger connection to downtown via Mitchell, Torina, and Sola. But one of the things and what we had in the grant was to have a bicycle boulevard. It's kind of dotted here along Chino. But as we were going through the traffic analysis as part of that grant, this is what we were finding. And I'm going to take a quick pause point here. This is just a basic graphic of showing dominant vehicle patterns in the west side and lower west neighborhoods. one of the things that when we were doing this review and seeing how many vehicles pass through this, it's the blue line here coming from the Mesa, Alta Mesa neighborhoods, is that there are a lot of vehicles bypassing the Carrillo Highway 101 intersection. It's already a very congested intersection, and we don't see that intersection improving over time. We probably anticipate it to worsen over time, especially as the Highway 101 widening project comes online, because we'll have even more users for the freeway. So, again, we expect there still to be strong vehicular patterns coming from Carrillo onto Chino and then Mitchell to Rena. So if we're trying to design a bicycle boulevard, which is, I don't think I defined it yet, but it's just a low volume street of cars, where cars and cyclists can coexist. And with the amount of traffic that we're seeing now and that's anticipated, there would have to be a lot of traffic diversion in the neighborhood if we were to keep Chino as the bicycle boulevard. So what we were looking at, and what we also heard from the residents, of what streets do you already bike on that you already feel are low stress. We heard that Gillespie, which is the green line here, is a good low stress street, and that's what we saw too in our data for vehicular traffic. And a low volume street, I'm not sure, it has to be 1,500, that the target is no more than 1,500 vehicles. And what we were seeing in that stretch, just for example, in Chino, it's just that it's the lower half of Chino is about 3,000 vehicles in the peak hours we were seeing. So we've been, as part of the grant, just costing out, well, what had Chino cost as we provided in the grant application, and how much would it cost for Gillespie. And then also, let me pause. Well, first, along Gillespie too, why it's an attractive street and why people use it is because it's also the direct street to not only Harding, it's the back entrance, the pedestrian entrance into the elementary school. And then also, if you were to continue north, you would basically go right into the bicycle parking lot of La Cumbre Junior High and the Santa Barbara Community Academy. Those are the two schools that exist at that campus. And that's good. So that would, again, be a good north-south connection. But what happens if you're coming from MoDOC? Our concerns were, would people take the route to Gillespie if your destination is downtown? So the other street that we heard that people already like to use is San Pasqual, and that it's kind of, so we see Gillespie as being the sort of neighborhood route, and we see San Pasqual being a neighborhood and a crosstown route for cyclists. So when we're looking at the treatments that would need to come online to ensure that it is a low volume street and have some traffic diverters, crossing improvements, etc., what we're finding in order of magnitude is we can get 2 bicycle boulevards for the price of 1. So that's the good news. So that's something that we're in discussions with Caltrans and subsequently the CTC to try to get that scope change. One of the other elements is also in the Lower West neighborhood is to these certain sections along Wentworth and Rancheria, again, are already very low volume streets, and there would just be minor improvements more in signage and striping for those streets. And then, of course, as Derek, eventually the Lower West neighborhood and that bicycle boulevard would go right into the Cliff Drive improvements that Derek just discussed. The last item is the MODOC along the Lacumba Junior High and Santa Barbara Community Academy. So if I were to go back, another dominant vehicle pattern is along MODOC. And what we're hearing from the residents is this continues to be a really busy street, and there's just a lot, it feels higher stress for walking and biking along this corridor. So what we're exploring, what we received a Measure A grant for, is to evaluate a concept of a multi-use path along this stretch of road along MODOC between Las Positas and Mission. And as Derek explained in his presentation too, that we are going to be having soon constructed the multi-use path along a certain section of MODOC from Calle de los Amigos to the Las Positas intersection, and then again varying down to the beach. We're expecting more users on that roadway, and I think with the multi-use path on that section of MODOC, there will be a continued demand to get into the west side. And so again, we're looking at a multi-use path along that stretch. And then also to wrap around the junior high multi-use path, and then that would lead you to Gillespie if you're going into the neighborhood as well. So it's still in concept. It's something in concept. We're hearing good things about it from the residents, but this is an area that we needed to survey, which we're in the process of doing, and we need to do a concept layout of what that looks like. There are a lot of mature trees along that stretch, and so we're just trying to see how much right-of-way we have to work with, and we're hoping to return to the community in January to discuss the concept further. So essentially, those three strategies and have folded into the plan and the short term and the long term infrastructure improvements, and we want you to evaluate this against the Vision Zero strategy, circulation element, pedestrian master plan, and bicycle master plan. Included in here, the staff report was just a list of all the goals and strategies among those various planning documents that you would need to find consistency with. And I wanted to, yes, it looks like. So Mr. Dayton was pointing out just that there's just a little Cliff Notes sheet of what the various policies are, and that we're hoping that you find the plan consistent with these various strategies, move the plan on for council approval. I'll take another pause because given this plan, okay, these all sound fantastic, and some are implemented or that are under in design that will come to the neighborhood soon. But what do we do with the other $17 million need? So I forgot to put the page in, but it's on page 34 is the list of the summary of all the emerging projects. If I were to summarize those, this is what we'd be going after for the active transportation and highway safety improvement program grants in the spring. So roughly what we think with support of council that we would be applying for 7 enhanced intersections and new pedestrian scale lighting along San Andres. We'd have 4 enhanced intersections along Chino Street, sidewalk infill along Valerio, and actually it's Calle Poniente and Cannon run. They're on opposite sides. It's Calle Cannon, I believe. And then bike lane and bicycle improvements in the Lower West Side neighborhood. And then the potential to add on also pending support from the west side residents is that multi-use path along Modoc between Las Positas and Mission Streets, and along Portis Suerto between Modoc and Gillespie. And then the summary of already funded projects. So yeah, we have about just under $7 million that is being invested in the lower west and west side neighborhoods now. And then there's, besides infrastructure-related items, there's things that shouldn't be ignored either, and that's what we documented as additional plan items. And some of these were just do it items, others are ongoing. I'll highlight a couple. I talked to you about that there was a pattern of collisions, pedestrian collisions, at a traffic signal at Mitchell, Torena, and San Andres. And that's, as you've seen, traffic signals is one of the highest levels for crossing improvements. But yet there was an issue of left-turning vehicles for pedestrians. So one of the things that was a just do it was we manipulated the signal to have, it's called an LPI, which is a leading pedestrian interval. So all the vehicles are at a stop, but a pedestrian would have a few, I believe it's a 4-second lead to establish their presence in the roadway, making them very visible for the left-turning vehicles to then improve their yielding. Another thing, as I discussed, was curb extensions along San Andres. One of the just do it items, just as an interim measure when we were doing our field reviews, was San Andres and the intersection of San Andres and Victoria. That is an intersection that goes directly into Bonet Park. On one leg of the intersection, it was really hard to see oncoming vehicles, especially when we do our field work. We purposely go at times when either school's going into session, or in this case was the school just recently got out, and there's one thing for visibility for an adult, but when you also see in field operations when you have a child trying to make that same cross, it's very different, and their visibility is even less than an adult. So there was one thing that we quickly sent crews out to extend the red curb at that intersection. And again, in hopes to improve it even more with the curb extensions and pedestrian rapid flashing beacons in the future. I won't go all over all 9, but yeah, some of it's just maintenance related, and continue to trim like tree canopies and for the existing street lights. We did some limbing up just again in our field reviews and worked with parks crews on that. But then just vegetations just at intersections for line of sight, and all of that is in process and always ongoing. So our next steps, we're here tonight. This similar presentation will be held also at the Neighborhood Advisory Council. And then our goal is to be at City Council by, I believe the tentative date right now is December 10th. For anybody watching at home or have any comments, I'm still always available via phone or email. If there is, we're always taking feedback and comments on the plan. And then I just will end at the staff recommendation. And I'm happy to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you very much, Ms. Grant. That's a thorough presentation. Are there any questions amongst the committee?
Yes.
Mr. France.
Thank you. It's so cool to see this draft. And anyway, and especially in addition to laying out what's already funded, what's to be applied for, and the additional plan items, how cool is it to have a draft plan that already has completed status items of issues that arose in a public process? It's really cool. And from different departments too, right? Like, yeah. This is what it looks like when things are working, in my view. Question about the leading pedestrian interval. So I've seen that, I think, on maybe State and Gutierrez, and then at Castillo and Shoreline Cabrillo by Los Baños. For sure. Right? Yeah. So similar. So I guess my question is, how many of those LPIs are there out there in the city? And I see them and observe them, but I'm also wondering if we've gotten any kind of feedback. Mr. Bailey, I don't know if there's. It's a cool thing. It'd be interesting just to see how they're being received so far.
Committee Member France, the only other one is at Bath and Haley. And the challenge with LPIs in Santa Barbara is we run really short cycle lengths. And so a cycle length is the amount of time it takes to cycle around and serve all the movements. One of the things that's good about running short cycle lengths is it tends to be very pedestrian friendly. Nobody has to wait very long. It's actually good for traffic too, if the traffic volumes can support that. A lot of big cities struggle with that. What tends to blow out cycle lengths to get them really long is when you have really wide intersections. You have to time them for pedestrians crossing all the way around, and if you have 20 or 30-second countdown timers going on, plus it takes a long time to move all the traffic through, the green lights have to be really long. There can be a really long wait. So back to short cycle lengths and LPIs. What an LPI effectively does is it delays the onset of green. So the walk light turns on and it just holds the green for a few seconds and then it releases it. But with our really short cycle lengths, that can mean at times there's not enough green time for traffic to get through. So we use them sparingly, and where we see operational issues, we haven't used them as a blanket, haven't done blanket implementations. Perhaps in the future, but for now we're sticking to the locations where we have collision problems or some sort of other operational issue.
And have you gotten any operational feedback, like from pedestrians, from drivers, any kind of confusion or?
State and Gutierrez, so it's only the Gutierrez movement where the walk light comes up early, and the reason for that is there's a westbound Gutierrez traffic, westbound left turn, crashing into people in the crosswalk. That's been a pattern. Some people on Gutierrez Street have commented that they see the walk lights come on and they feel like they want to go, but it hasn't resulted in any other operational issues, just comments and observations, so nothing negative.
Great, thank you for answering that question. I think it's great that the city both is taking on kind of some of these newer treatments or opportunities, and also you have the capacity to really like evaluate where they're useful and effective. And thank you for including that here to address this need.
Question on that same topic.
Thank you, Ms. Blackerby.
Wait. So I'm actually really glad I learned the name of this, because I go through that Gutierrez intersection on my bike almost every day, and I see that thing, and I think it's awesome. I remember reading somewhere, and I don't know if this was a bill in process in the state legislature or if it actually is the law now, but I read somewhere that there was at very least a proposal that cyclists could, I don't know if it was, if just they were going straight or what, but that they could also use that LPI as a way to start their turning movement. So I will admit that in my mind, I think it is the law, because I think that's what I read. So I do it every time, and it makes me feel so much safer as a cyclist because I'm making that left turn onto State to go under. and so many people are like just like revving, getting ready to go, and then just jam under that thing. So it's awesome. But it would also be good to know from an education perspective if that is in fact the law, and if it's not, then gosh darn it, we should ask for them to bring it back and try to get through again. But it is something I remember reading that makes a lot of sense, kind of like a bike box without a box, but giving you that little lead time, just if people knew that they could do that on their bike and not just when they're a pedestrian. So
We'll have to research that for you.
okay.
Not aware that it's the law, but we'll find out.
Cool.
There are a lot of laws that get passed.
Thank you, Ms. Blackerby. Any other questions or comments from committee members?
If I could ask a silly question, is it
Brent?
sorry? Is it Calle Canyon or is it Calle Canyon? There is a tilde there, right? Okay, cool.
My understanding is that we're to recommend that the plan is, we're being asked to recommend the, that's right. You had one here. Mr. Remus, please. I thought it was 3 and 4.
Thank you. Back again. Barry Remus with Coast. And we also, as well, with this plan, very impressive work. We realize this is draft. Obviously, there's, it'll more to evolve, but it's really, this is great. We're certainly pleased at Coast to see the Vision Zero strategy being implemented as well and embraced here. Coast, as well as our partners with SB Bike, were engaged in, and Coast co-hosted about last year, a West Side pedestrian bike community safety workshop. I get don't ask me to make the acronym correct here, but we engaged with Cal Walks and Berkeley Safe Trek and MTD as well, also as co-partners to engage the community in a listening, an active engagement workshop as well. We also embarked upon the street on foot and on bike to walk the neighborhoods, and also Coast has previously done through our East Side and West Side Walks program, some night walks as well with community members to get their feedback as well. The results of that workshop were presented to the city, and so we certainly hope that you've been able to factor those in, as well as the listening workshops as well, to really make this a comprehensive plan so that the community members, you've listened, obviously, and to really help them to see that that's happened, and you're taking action to help them to see that the city is just as equally engaged with the West Side as it was for the East Side traffic management transportation plan to provide lighting, walking, and pedestrian and bicyclist not only just access, but safety improvements so that they feel that this is a safer community for them to live in. And wow, 2 bike boulevards, the price of 1. That's like one-stop shopping. So this is really nice to see. If I can also supplement, hopefully, Derek, you won't mind me, I believe that there's also another LPI at the intersection of De La Guerra and Santa Barbara Street, because I drive at that intersection quite a bit, and I see that the walk signal activates before and it says yield left turn must yield. So that's also a bonus for you too. But we certainly endorse this. We hope that you'll approve this and pass it on to City Council. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Remus. There is a staff recommendation that we find the plan consistent with the city's Vision Zero strategy, circulation element, pedestrian management plan, and bicycle master plan, to move the plan forward to the City Council for approval. Discussion? Ms. Blackerby?
So it's awesome. I love it. 2 things in the draft plan. On page 15, and I appreciate that you have the actual survey questions attached to that. The question actually is about mode, if I'm correct. You actually asked people what the primary form of transportation they take was, right? That's the question. The question is not, what do you like best? Which do you favor? But the way that this is part of the way this is described, it says private cars and walking are most favored, bus and carpool least favored. You can probably imagine why that jumped out at me. But generally, about bike or walking, because of all these projects, right? This is what people are doing. If they had a better setup or system, they might be doing something else. So, not to nitpick language, but since that's not what the question says, what do you favor? What do you do, right? So if that could be sort of clarified. And then I attended at least the first workshop. I couldn't go to the approaches workshop, but what I appreciated was that there were, the different maps for lighting and ped and bike. And there was one for transit, which was great. And I know that that's not the city's purview of those things, but I noticed that that the feedback of that is not in here. So I'm just wondering if that's possible, or if I just want it to be clear to the world that you did ask for that input. Mm-hmm. And even if it's just the map and you say, and we passed it on to MTD or whatever. Right. I'm just curious why that didn't sort of make it into the final plan.
Briefly, the committee member Blackerby, for the most comments were just from the existing transit stops, and they're reflected more in the additional plan items of more on maintenance needs, and so some where there was existing bus shelters and lighting. Maybe the lights were out or flickering or something, and so it was along those comments. And then there was a smaller comments, I believe, like on Mission Street, where there were some existing transit stops, that there wasn't like a adjacent concrete pad; it was just parkway. But you're right; I can definitely articulate those comments better.
Committee Member Horn, please.
Mm-hmm. But I was just curious how many surveys you got. The committee member Horn, the count was 180. Just for as a comparison for the east side, I believe we received about 250. From the east side residents. So I felt like I never know what the best metric is for survey response, but we were in the ballpark from our prior effort. From the communications person that we worked with to help synthesize some of the survey findings, he said that was a really good response rate to assure me. I think for me, and not to be transportation centered, but and thinking that it's on everybody's minds at all times, maybe is an incorrect statement for the rest of the community. But I did feel that who showed up in the survey responses and the emails received did represent a good cross section, and I did feel that voices were heard amongst all locations of the neighborhood. Was that me?
Yep, sorry.
Oh, when you looked at the daytime and compared that to the nighttime collision data, that the nighttime was so much worse in certain areas, and I thought I heard you say that it was related to DUI situations. And I was just wondering if that's true, that you said that. Is there something going on with communicating with the police department about enforcement? Anyway, just wondered.
Committee Member Horn, as far as the biggest pattern of collisions in the west side was the San Andres Carrillo intersection with the broadside collisions. That was the pattern. Where I referenced DUI, I believe it was 4 DUI collisions along Mission Street. And usually with DUI, there isn't a engineering fix with those, so it is an enforcement need. I see that as it's not specific to the west side. It's a overall citywide issue that unfortunately Santa Barbara wants to be the best at everything. Unfortunately, we have I forget the ranking. It's high. It's either 1 or 2 with cities of our size with DUI related collisions. So it is something that is very serious within our city. It's something that as we continue to implement the Vision Zero strategy, and we're in development right now of a website and trying to get the message out there that is one component that we would address.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Committee Member Horn, any other questions or comments on the part of other committee members?
Thank you, Chair Hodges. I would be out of place not to say all the things that come to my mind. I can't stop, before my last meeting.
Chance.
My last chance. What a great, and thank you, Barry Remis from Coast, for coming out for your public comment. I really appreciate the work that especially Coast has done with the Vision Zero, just spreading that vision. It really is a aspirational approach that there is a lens, these 7 concepts, like that lens looking at our streets is a needed shift, and it honors our communities. It honors the people who are out on their own streets, and it's such a pleasure to see that integrated in to these neighborhood transportation plans. And I think that totally harmonizes with the feedback you're getting from residents. Actually, to your point, community member Horn, the DUI, pointing out those DUI fatalities or collisions is really important element here, because while we're working with infrastructure and streetlights and things like that, part of Vision Zero is a cultural change.
Education.
It's not just education.
It's more.
It's us taking the right initiative to go towards what we want. And we want streets where the kids, one of those facts that jumped out at me from this was it half of all of the households had a kid going to school, or was that even going to elementary school in the neighborhood? Mm-hmm. That's crazy. We don't think about that. Sometimes we discount the density of families in our neighborhoods. And so, thinking about that, and as applies to all the neighborhoods in the city, we don't just need better infrastructure, but we also need to hold ourselves to a higher standard. When we're driving, when we're walking, when we're biking. And when we're driving, there's 2 things that I just have to kind of vent about, because I think that's part of the iceberg that these efforts and that Vision Zero is, holistically part of. And that's holding ourselves to a high standard of not drinking and driving. And I mean, we have a lot of great establishments that serve a lot of amazing beer and wine and cocktails and all that. And then we have these beer festivals, and wine festivals. And we have to shift how we think about how we're going to get to these places. If we want to go drink, it's not just oh, I'm okay, I'm under the legal limit, right? Because I think in addition to DUI collisions, often people get cavalier about driving through. And I think that just as dangerous is this distracted driving I don't know if you all are walking around, but I see every other person, or sometimes just a sequence of people in a row just zombies as they're driving, and they're just looking down, going through intersections, going through like about to get on the freeway. It's all over. And overall, nationally, right, traffic collisions and injuries have increased. They're going up.
For
Right.
pedestrians.
For pedestrians, I think across the board, but definitely for pedestrians and bicyclists who face a disproportionate impact for this very negative trend that we all just kind of are okay about. And this is something that we need to hold ourselves to a higher standard. Similarly, when people are walking through intersections with a cell phone, if you're crossing a street, don't be looking at a cell phone. I mean, come on, But we, as a community, we need to hold ourselves to a higher standard. And I know that part of the Vision Zero work that the city is doing is this type of messaging. And I just really want to appreciate all that work and how it complements this type of neighborhood work and this neighborhood transportation plan. So I'll get off my soapbox, but thank you for the work, all of the work that you all are doing in this area.
Thank you, Committee Member France. Are there any further comments from the committee?
I would move if there are no further comments, I would move that we find the plan consistent with the city's Vision Zero strategy, circulation element, pedestrian management plan, and bicycle master plan, and that we move the plan forward to City Council for approval.
Do we have a second?
I second.
Thank you, Committee Member Horn. Is there any further discussion? I move for a vote. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed?
Okay, we did it.
Yeah, thank you for that. And we have some program updates. It's a new thing that we want to put on the agenda so that you get an idea of some of the things that we're doing, but we're not necessarily bringing a report. So we're putting them on the agenda to inform you of what's going on and make sure you're part of our ambassador team for what's going on in the city. So thank you for that. A couple of these we'll share on this. I'm gonna let Jessica do Milpas and the downtown MTD or the downtown waterfront reports, but just to note that they're on there. But the bike share, we're really excited about bike share. We've been talking about this for a long time. We were talking about it in the circulation element back in 1998 when that was approved, and certainly in the bike plan we've been talking about it. We're there. We have applications from 3 different companies to do it. We have various. Actually, it was in this Thursday in the Independent. Nick Welsh wrote a little bit about it. We have everything from an all-electric fleet to electrics and non-electrics. We have docked and non-docked. So we have a lot to choose from and talk about. We're narrowing our decision-making. It doesn't need council authorization based on the way we've set it up, but we're probably going to take it to council to inform them of the decision. It's a big deal because, and which is part of the reason we've been hesitant in the past, because there'll be bikes, the same bike, all over the city, perhaps 200 to 300 of them. And so it'll be something that everyone sees. What I like the way to describe how it is, how it will come off to residents is because our downtown is, and the way we do things is so architecturally dialed in, that when you introduce something like bike share and all of a sudden you see 200 to 300 bikes on the streets, the people are more likely to be concerned about them, actually may not even ride them. They're just looking at them going, what is this? So we will have to do a pretty big rollout of what that looks like. It is a pilot program, so it's not something that would be permanent. It's something that we're trying out. And so we'll bring it to council. We'll let you know. We'll send you a notice when it's going to come so you can come and participate in that. And then updates on...
Chair Hodges, if I could just
question?
ask a quick
Yeah.
question on that.
Mm-hmm. Chair France?
Do you see that, thank you, Mr. Dayton, do you see that going to council as an informational item or as a decision to be made by council?
It would be an information item, just because of the way it's been set up legally. It's an application that is approvable by the Public Works Director, and that's the way the council set that up. So, but we do. It is a big deal, and so we want council to have the opportunity to comment on it and look at it.
Great.
Okay, then the next program update is the Milpas Corridor Planning Effort. And that we launched and had our first listening workshop on October 1st at the Franklin Center. It was really well attended. And it was basically, we shared what is known for city staff of what our future maintenance is, that in the next couple years, we do know that Milpas will have a paving project. But it was time to revisit back with the community and residents to just receive impact if there's, or input if there's anything else that we may be overlooking in terms of infrastructure needs. So that was really the purpose of the October 1st meeting. I don't have too much to share in what we've heard yet because we're still compiling all the notes. That was a good thing that it was really well attended, which made for a lot of notes to to put together. So that's what we're doing right now. And for those that, again, had additional information from that workshop, following that workshop, or that could not attend and definitely received emails like, I wish I could have attended, we basically mirrored that same questions that we asked at the workshop for the survey. And that survey was launched just, I believe, about a week ago. And we've already had about 100 responses so far, so that's exciting. And we plan to have the survey period open through November 15th, and we hope to return for approaches in early December back to the community on that one. So I think, this is our last meeting of the year. So I will be returning in the new year with feedback of what we've received on that effort, and based upon that feedback, whether any infrastructure needs would be ripe for the Active Transportation Program grant. So what we've heard tonight is the Cliff Drive is the potential for Active Transportation Program funds, as well as the West Side and Lower West Side neighborhoods. And then the third potential grant that could be is along Milpas. And the last item is just the quarterly report from the MTD on the downtown waterfront shuttle from April to June of 2019, and it's just available for your review. And is there any, do you have any comments, Ms. Blackerby, based upon the report or anything?
I would just say
else
there's
to
also an
add?
annual report.
Oh, and then the
In
annual,
addition.
I'm sorry, yes, and the annual report.
Don't make me write that for nothing.
Yeah.
I have a question.
Committee Member Horn, please.
Just something that occurred to me today when I was looking at the empty buses during the day and how crowded they are, during the peak hours of commuting. And just wondering, has it ever been considered by MTD to do like smaller bus shuttles during the day when there's no peak, and then use the big buses at the peak times? I don't know. It's a thought. I don't know if Hillary wants to comment on that.
Committee Member Blackery?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. Is that?
No, I can talk to you later.
Yeah.
Okay, that's just a. It's just a comment.
Comment received. Thank you.
Okay.
And that we could work with MTD I know that a lot of these reports just go out as just in our program update section, but at some point, we'll work with MTD to have just a touch point and presentation in 2020.
And as a reminder, all the downtown waterfront shuttle reports also go to the downtown parking committee for their review, since they're intimately involved in the funding aspect of that.
If there are no further questions or comments, I declare this meeting adjourned.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.